And with that, I will introduce our speaker, Fausta Luchini. Fausta was a former psychotherapist for 20 years and is now a dedicated trauma-sensitive coach and consultant, and now runs a private practice where she empowers clients to overcome stress, build resilience, and rediscover joy. So, Fausta, thank you for being with us today. And the first question to kick off the fireside, I'd love to get a bit personal here. So
Sure.
you transitioned from being a psychotherapist to a life coach. And I'd love to know what motivated this switch and how that has influenced your approach to coaching.
Absolutely. I love to tell this story. So I lived in Louisville, Kentucky most of my life. At a certain point, I was a therapist. I did community mental health. I had a private practice. Um, and then I began working for a regional nonprofit. And that was completely remote. And so I kind of woke up one morning and realized that I could live anywhere I wanted to. That was super exciting. So I decided I wanted to move to Savannah, Georgia, because I always wanted to live close to the ocean. So we actually did that. I just had a small private practice at that point, closed it down, moved to Savannah, which I love. Um, After I'd been here a year or so, I looked into maybe doing some therapy again, maybe some online stuff. And I realized that my license didn't transfer as easily as I thought it would. Right. And so that was kind of a stopper. Um, so I had had a life coach or an executive coach really as part of my work and really loved that experience. And I realized that if I were a life coach, I could work with people anywhere in the world. And I wouldn't have to diagnose anybody or help them figure out what was wrong. We could just look at what they wanted to do with their lives to make it different and help them do that. Part of that call was because I really wanted to work with people that experience trauma from working with people that experience trauma, right? That secondary trauma when it's not yours, but somebody that you care about is suffering, right? And there's not anything wrong. There just isn't anything wrong with that. Um, and so I became a life coach and love it.
Yeah, thank you, Fausta. And you
Yeah.
bring up a really important piece about secondary trauma.
Mhm.
We talk a lot about that in our ShareWell support groups. I know you've led groups on ShareWell. And let's dive in actually to mindful self-compassion, because that was actually the name of some of the groups that you led.
Right.
And so, yeah, I'd love to know, what is mindful self-compassion, as you would define it, and why do you think it is so key for everyone to practice?
Yes. So mindful self-compassion is actually was developed by Dr. Kristen Neff and Dr. Chris Germer. And I was fortunate enough to be able to take the training in that and became a trained teacher of mindful self-compassion. So what I talk about tonight is based primarily on that with my own experience, right? And so I want to be clear about that. Um, so mindful self-compassion is so important because we live in such a complex world and there is so much judgment and so many things that we can do that other people are like, that's not how you're supposed to do that. And if it's not other people that are doing that, sometimes it's ourselves. All those negative voices from other people get incorporated into who we are. The problem with that is that it's not helpful. I mean, if that was productive, great. But people don't change behaviors or feelings or thoughts because somebody else has criticized them, usually. And often we have a really harsh inner critic ourselves that beats us up for not being right, that fusses and scolds because we didn't already know something that we couldn't have known, right? And so the magic of mindful self-compassion is it lets us really step into being able to understand and forgive ourselves and move forward with a different perspective.
Thank you for that, Fausta.
Yeah.
And in terms of mindful self-compassion, um, what would you say are the biggest reasons people struggle with mindful self-compassion?
So part of that is because they have misconceptions about what
Mm,
it means to be mindfully self-compassionate, right? People think, oh, that's selfish. I don't want to be
mm,
selfish, right? People think, oh, if I'm compassionate for myself, it's like I won't care about other people. Or they think it's self-indulgent. And so if I'm self-compassionate, then I'll just do anything I want to do. Or maybe I won't do anything. Maybe I'll just lie around on the couch all day, watch TV, and eat bonbons, right? And those are myths. None of that is true. There's actually research that shows that the more self-compassionate we are, the more compassionate we can be with others.
mm.
And mindful self-compassion isn't just that warm, fuzzy, and I'll talk about this more later, but that warm, fuzzy, it's okay, everything's going to be all right. It is that piece of it, but there's much more to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And many of us weren't taught mindful self-compassion when they grew up. I know I wasn't.
Yep.
I came from a very what would I say, like unemotional, kind of rough household.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm curious, Fausta, what are some tools that we can do, the audience, myself, to yeah, increase our self-compassion?
Okay. So, in order to answer that question, I have to do more background about mindful self-compassion. Are you up for that? So,
Yeah.
here's one thing I got to issue this warning. When I get started, I just want to keep going. Okay. So don't hesitate to stop me. But here we go. So there are really three parts of mindful self-compassion. There's mindfulness, because we have to be aware that we're having a hard time before we can do anything about it, right? You know how often we just say, people say, how are you doing? Well, we may feel terrible, but we're like, I'm fine. And we do that to ourselves too. So you have to be able to mindfully recognize, I'm not doing fine. I'm not okay. We invite you to recognize that feeling that way, whatever it is you're feeling, is just part of being human. We call the second part common humanity. Suffering is part of life. Everybody suffers. It may be different degrees, different kinds of suffering, but everybody feels those painful feelings. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. The third part of it is, of course, self-kindness. That doesn't fix anything, but it's kind of like when you have the flu or you're sick, but particularly the flu. If somebody you love has the flu, you want to take care of them. You bring them chicken soup, you take their temperature, you get them some pain relief, all those things, right? That does not cure the flu. What you're doing is making them feel better while they're suffering. And that's the self kindness part. There's no need to beat yourself up when you're already in pain and not feeling right. So that's the first part. That's what we think of as the yin of self compassion, or the tender part. And there are some techniques I'll show you in a few minutes that really draw on that. Okay. But I do want to get to the second part, which is the yang of self compassion. That's the fierce part. That's the action part. That's the part that keeps it from being self indulgent or lazy. The fierce part of self compassion also has three parts: it's providing, protecting, and motivating yourself like a
Mhm.
good coach would, right? And so it's asking the question, what do I need? What do I need to move forward here? So, okay, let me give you the magic formula, what I think of as the magic formula for mindful self-compassion.
I'm ready.
And then we'll talk about some other techniques. When you're having a hard time, the first thing you want to do is with some kind of soothing gesture, which can be as simple as a hand on your heart or both hands over your heart. For some people, that feels more soothing. Yeah, I invite you to try it. And just take a breath, noticing the sensation, the warmth of your hands on your heart. And then you say to yourself, this is hard. Whatever this is that's going on, it's a moment of suffering. And so you allow yourself just to experience that. And remind yourself, this doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. Everybody feels this way sometimes. It is just the way people are. And then you ask yourself, so what do I need? What do I need right now to feel better? And that's a key element, right? The answer to that can be any of 100 things. Maybe I need to go for a walk. Maybe I need to take a full, satisfying breath. Maybe I need to whip out my mindfulness app and do a 5-minute meditation. Maybe, maybe I'm hungry. Maybe I need to take a shower. There's like a million answers to that, right? What that does is that brings down and regulates your nervous system, right? It makes you feel better in that moment. Because when we're upset and struggling, we kind of move into fight or flight mode. And when you're doing that, then you can't think clearly. And so you can't solve any problems because you're like this, right? And that's not helpful. So that first self-soothing brings that level down, allows you to take some steps to be kind to yourself. Then you ask, what do I need in the long run? Is there a problem here that's causing this suffering? Is there something I need to say, do, think about, learn differently so that I don't stay stuck in this pattern? And let me give you an example. Sometimes when we have negative behaviors that we don't even really want to do, we get stuck in a pattern of doing the behavior. So I could be smoking a cigarette, you know? And so I'm trying to quit smoking. I know I need to quit smoking, but in that moment I smoke a cigarette and then I think, oh, that's terrible. You know, you shouldn't have done that. And you start beating yourself up for it. So with mindful self-compassion, you stop at that point. You do this is hard. This is what it's like. What do I need to do? If you stop there, you can forgive yourself and just think, well, I just need to do better. I don't know about you, Amy, but I quit smoking about 15 years ago. That did not work for me because the next thing you knew, I was smoking a cigarette again. And then I could go through that process of being miserable about it, right? Feeling better because I had been compassionate to myself and then stepping right back into the same behavior. And we do that with all kinds of things. The fierce self-compassion part comes in where you ask yourself, okay, if my goal is to change that behavior, whatever the behavior is, what do I need to actually do that? Often what we figure out, if we're lucky, is that doing or not doing that thing is an act of compassion for ourselves. It's not compassionate for me to smoke cigarettes, to eat unhealthy all the time, all that stuff. I don't have to list that, right? We know that acts of compassion are ways we take care of ourselves. And so you ask, what do I need to provide myself? Or what do I need to protect? And how can I motivate myself without all this beating myself up, but like a good coach would? So at that point, and I'm just going to pause and take a breath. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay, cool. So when you ask, what do I need to provide, protect, or motivate myself? Smoking is a great example. I tried providing myself patches. I tried Wellbutrin. I mean, there are all kinds of techniques we can explore.
Mhm.
And that's helpful because even if one doesn't work, if you keep searching for that, what do I need? Sooner or later, something will kick in, right? What do I need to protect? What boundaries do I need? What do I need to say? Maybe there's somebody else that I need to say no to. When I used to try to quit smoking with somebody, we would just encourage each other to relapse. I hate to admit that, but it is true, right? And so I needed to say no to that. I needed to set that boundary and decide this was for me. And it didn't matter what anybody else did. And then how do I motivate myself? Well, I keep bringing myself back to this thing I'm going to do rather than just beating myself up and stopping. So that's sort of the overarching mindful self-compassion piece, right?
Yeah, I really like how you framed that, Fausta. And yeah, they broke it down into 3 steps, which seem easy, but also in practice are also really
Yeah,
hard.
yeah,
So, yeah,
yeah.
so why don't we move into actually some practice? You mentioned a role play. I don't know if you want to do that or you have some other examples that people can tether to. Yeah.
Yeah, so, well, first, I want to share a couple of just practices you can do. And so, one is soothing touch. And so, we know that if you put a hand or two over your heart, that's calming. If you put a hand or two on your belly, for many people, that can also be really calming and soothing. Certainly, taking a slower breath or a fuller breath is kind of magical. Slowing down is huge, right? Anything you're doing, just slowing it down. In fact, I'm going to take a drink of water. Putting a hand on your shoulder and bringing it down your arm or alternating is real soothing. I kind of like to cross my arms and just gently squeeze the tops of your arms. And again, that just brings the level way down. I can feel my own levels coming way down, right?
Yes.
Uh, and you can hear that in my voice.
Mhm.
So, in terms of role play, I want to invite you to think of the situation. Do you want to play? Are
Yeah,
you up for
sure.
it? We have not practiced this. I didn't ask you this. I'm taking you completely off guard, right? Is there a situation you can think of that's just difficult for you?
A situation right now that is difficult for me.
Mhm.
Um,
One that obviously you're comfortable sharing in front of multitudes of people, right?
yeah, yeah. So yes. Um, a person in my family that I have difficulty like relating and communicating with in an effective manner. Yeah,
Yeah,
that like, yeah, it's just challenging.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So I want to invite you to walk through the process with me, right? And so just think a minute about what the situation is like for you, noticing the feelings that come up for you, right? And then I invite you to join me in some kind of soothing gesture. And just say to yourself or out loud, this is hard. Anybody would have a hard time with this. Struggling with communication is just difficult.
Struggling with communication is just difficult.
Yeah. And so asking yourself, how can I be kind to myself around this? Is there something I can do in the moment? And in a way, you are doing something already, right? You chose this to talk about.
Mm.
Yeah. Is there something else that you need in the moment?
That I
Or
need
that you
in
would
the
like?
moment. Yeah, probably just breath
Mhm.
and being present, getting in my body out of my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Noticing the feelings that come up without pushing them away, which is the mindfulness piece, right? I won't do this now because it is really a more intimate kind of experience. But if we were in a session or if you were doing it on your own, you would want to notice what the sensations are, what you're feeling. And so often, for example, there's a tightness in the chest or in the stomach. Some people feel it in their face.
Mm.
And just noticing that and allowing it to be for a moment, letting it be there. And then asking yourself, is there something I need moving forward? What do I need to do around this?
Mm.
And, and
Yeah, in my situation, something came up instantly. Do you want me
yeah,
to share that, Fausta?
absolutely,
Okay.
please, if you don't mind, I'd love for you
Um,
to.
yeah, is just setting, I guess, clearer boundaries, like I guess admitting to myself or being aware that the communication with this family member is always going to be challenging. But pick times, like set boundaries around like in the beginning of the day, I can't get into conversation with this person. It derails my whole day. So that was a first step, I think, was choosing
Yeah,
when I'm capable, like mentally, physically, like to have a conversation with said person.
that is so beautiful. I love that. Really. And it's amazing how often that happens. That once you allow yourself to really step into that experience and are kind to yourself, people are often like, oh, oh yeah, I need to do this. Yeah. The beauty of coaching is knowing that we all have our own answers inside ourselves, and that it's just a matter of being able to reconnect with that. Ah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Fausta. Yeah, I feel like I just had a boundary breakthrough.
That's
Amazing.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'll say we are going to switch to the Q&A in just a couple minutes. So if any of you all have questions for Fausta, please pop them in the Q&A box. And then for the final fireside question, um, let's see. I guess, Fausta, for those exploring self-compassion, you mentioned that a lot of your work was guided by two people. I forget their names exactly.
Kristen,
Um,
yeah, Kristen Neff and Chris Garmer.
Okay, wonderful. Are there any other kind of resources, people new to this? Like we can do your three-step model and some of the practices you've outlined. Is there any other like resources or places to go
Oh,
on the internet that you would
oh
recommend,
yes.
like good starting points? Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So one is that Kristen Neff has a website that has so many practices on it. And I really recommend that people look at that. Now, full disclosure, I used to just go look at it, and and it didn't really do me any good because I didn't really get it. Um, but if you dive into it a little bit, just following her, there are a number of meditations that are really helpful and some practices, some exercises, some kind of like the ones we just did, but there are a lot of other ones as well. Um, Also, I'm starting next Friday. I'm going to be doing some live classes on burn along. And of course, I would love for people to come to that. That's an online wellness platform. And I think you're going to share a link on that. Um,
Yeah.
I do some coaching. There's a lot of stuff on the internet about mindfulness, about self-compassion. I am partial to things that are really mindful self-compassion. But on the other hand, any self-compassion is good, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just posted in the chat for everyone a link to Fausta's website so you can all join her classes if you want. And then also, yeah, Facebook, LinkedIn, it's all those things. So stay connected with
Yeah.
Fausta. Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much. This is Fausta, been so helpful. Also, just your presence, like you're so calming in your energy. It's just nice to hold space with
Mhm.
you. And I just want to thank you for, yeah, giving your time to really support the ShareWell community. And Fausta's led support groups on our site too, and just impacted so many of our community members. So there's so much love for you from the ShareWell
Oh,
community.
that's
And for
sweet.
those who want to stay in touch with Fausta, I'll put her contact again. We'll also send this in a follow-up email, but take this. And then also, if you haven't joined a support group on ShareWell and you're new to ShareWell, you want to try us out, there's a bit of a gift for you. You can register through our conference page to get a free credit. So go ahead and do that. And with that, this closes our mindfulness summit. Stay tuned. ShareWell will be having another summit in just a month and a half. And thank you again, Fausta, for closing
Uh,
out our day so strong. We
Thank you,
really appreciate
Amy.
it.
I
Uh,
appreciate you so much. And
Okay.
share well.
Well,
Bye.
bye.